And I don't know how many of you heard what's going on as we came in. And I hope that if you did hear it, you enjoyed Marvin Gaye's great song. Love is why we're here. It's exciting to stand at the start of something new. It doesn't matter if it's the excitement of a new book that you're just beginning to get immersed in and that you feel is going to have a lot to say to you, or if it's the excitement of a new phenomenon. These experiences enliven us. I felt that excitement in the early 90s when I discovered A Course of Love. A Course in Miracles, I'm sorry, A Course in Miracles. It was just amazing to me. And even Journey Without Distance. I loved Journey Without Distance, and it gave me that same feeling. I was hearing about the start of something new. And when I heard John Mundy speak, I felt that, because I'm hearing from someone who was there at the beginning, when A Course in Miracles was starting something new in the world. And that's where I feel that we are with A Course of Love now. Just in these past couple of years, we've picked up momentum. Something new is happening. And that's my publisher, Glenn Coleman. He does deserve a round of applause. I mean, this combined volume, I think was, it's not only done beautifully, but having it all together. When Glenn and I met, he pointed out that there were more copies of the first book sold than the other two. And you gotta have it all. I mean, don't you feel that? Yeah, you gotta have it all. So this was really the magic key that got everything going. And I'm very grateful. I'm so glad to be here. I'm so glad that you're here. Being new and moving into the new is what I'm here to share with you today. And as we become new, the world becomes new. As we change our minds, we change the world. As A Course of Love begins, Jesus gives us a visual image, a metaphor of this world. You are an immigrant coming to a new world with all your possessions in hand. But as you glimpse what was once a distant shore and now is near, you realize none of what you formerly possessed and called your treasures are needed. How silly you feel to have carted them from one place to the next. You do not as yet realize how heavy were your burdens. What are our burdens? What I see are the trappings of all that we've learned in a lifetime of learning, all the false ideas that we have about ourselves. These have left us feeling duped. Jesus uses that word in A Course of Love. Duped. All that we thought would bring us to the happiness and peace of who we are seemed to stand out here somewhere, and to be in need of being chased down or earned. And it's been right here all along. So Jesus uses everything in his power, and his power is great, to help us to still our overactive minds and to bring us home to love. I've been saying lately that this time of going out with the books is like my going away to college time, because I never got to go away to college. And so I can look at that image of the new immigrant and think, well, this is like a few notches down from that. I'm going out into the world newly, freshly, with less baggage, in a wholehearted way. In the wholehearted way all of us are called to do. And I feel like if I can do that, especially this public speaking, you can do what you're called to do too. Because as Jesus brings us back to the heart's wisdom, he joins us together and gives us cause for movement. It's a movement from pain to love, from separation to union. from ideal-seeking perfectionism to intimate relationship, from human or divine to human and divine as one, from being in our heads to being in our hearts, wholehearted, loved, and loving. And here's the really big one. From being who we think we are, or think we should be, to being who we are in truth. To being all that we are. Jesus works a little differently in this course. This course will not call you to effort of any kind. It will not ask you to leave behind your addictions or to go on a diet or a fast. It will not even ask you to be kind. And I didn't make that up. It's a direct quote. And that sounds a little bit less funny when I go on saying, if this course merely calls you to sanity by calling you to let go of illusion in favor of the truth, and asks, does it not make sense that the only error possible is that of not being who you are? Well, there's a brilliant method to the madness that A Course of Love would seem to be. And I believe that it's explained in two very short quotes, both of them very close to saying the same thing. In the Course we hear, the self you have taken out of the learning loop is the self of love. And in the dialogues, the ego took the true self and true learner out of the learning loop.
Will you repeat those? Sorry.
The ego took the true self and true learner out of the learning loop. I always think of the learning loop as the giving and receiving. And that's kind of the way I see our hearts work. You know, there's always that flow. Yeah. And so, Jesus goes on to say, my dear brothers and sisters, what you truly are cannot be improved on. But because you are in a state of unremembering, you must relearn who you are. You can only relearn who you are by being who you are. You can only be who you are by sharing who you are. And that last part of that, you can only be who you are by sharing who you are, it's my favorite quote of the Course, because I found it to be so true. It's in what we give each other, in sharing, in friendship, in companionship, that I have discovered the most. From the first, we're asked not to apply any thought or effort to this course because our way of thought and effort has been ego-driven. We hear that it's not going to be our ego who takes this course. Instead, it's going to appeal to our heart, to the center of ourselves where the Christ in us abides. In the prelude of the Course of Love, that's the very beginning piece. And on page 2, which is in the very first day of my receiving of it, I heard that Christ would be the learner. And that felt so bizarre to me at the time. Christ would be the learner. But eventually, this made sense. And part of it came from a conversation that I had with a friend. I met my friend Bob when the treatises were coming out as a single volume way back in like 2003. The books used to be in these separate volumes. And he wanted to read it because of a mutual friend of ours who was really enamored with the Course. And so he wanted to read what she was reading. So we started with the treatises. And then a year or so later, when I came out with the dialogues, he went to the dialogues and read that. And only then did he go back and read the Course. And then he came to me and he said, Mari, I didn't believe this was Jesus until I read the Course. And now I do, because everything that was predicted Everything that was there at the end had been predicted in the beginning. And I knew you couldn't have done that yourself. Are many of you readers who've read it through at least once?
Mm-hmm. Have you read it through at least once?
Yeah. Yes. So not as many as I thought, so a lot of you are new. Okay. Well, welcome, welcome. That reference to, Christ being the learner, Jesus talks a lot about Christ and Christ consciousness at the beginning and at the end. And he describes it in many different ways with this, which is something I really love about this course. Jesus kind of stays away from an ultimate definition that we can go back and point to and say, this is the right answer. And the way he describes things, I feel it's like he knows how different each of us are. And he gives us ways that will speak to us. And there's also sort of this anticipation of acceptance that when we have become fully who we are, when we have reached this elevation of the selves of form, we will still all be different. And we will still have these different ways of loving to hear something expressed or a way that appeals to our hearts. So I'm really happy about that. And the heart is the focus for more than the first half of A Course of Love. And then we begin to hear about wholeheartedness. And wholeheartedness is described as the union of mind and heart. And I love that phrase, wholeheartedness, because we can all picture it. He also, this one that I just mentioned, the elevated self of form, this is sort of where we're headed. I think that's a clunky old phrase, And I think it probably only got stated that way so we wouldn't be tempted to leave form out because we've left our bodies out so much. But wholeheartedness I just love. And that's because I at least can really visualize that. I can see it the way Jesus describes it as the first union, where we're no longer warring against ourselves. We're at peace. We're not taking one thought to and warring it against what our heart wants to do. That's kind of that union, that when we unify mind and heart, we know ourselves. And I love it that it's called wholehearted because, like I said, I can just picture wholeheartedness. And I see that as the people I call wholehearted are authentic. And they have a passion for life. And so to associate this wonderful phrase of our first union with an ability to be wholehearted in life is something that I really appreciated. And I think we can also see how it is when we're not wholehearted. We all know what it's like to be half-hearted, to kind of think and mull and figure things out and leave our feelings out of it. And we can also have that, refusing to accept a situation that leaves us full of anxiety. And so this wholeheartedness is more than, it might first appear. And it really kind of ends up being, like the whole ball of wax. It's like when you're wholehearted, you are all that you are. And it's not about personality. This is about being who you are in wholeness. Would you like me to tell you a little bit more about the structure of A Course of Love, or are you okay just going on? Because I know so many of you are new, yeah?
Yeah, how did it come about, or I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. I can talk about how it came about now if you like. Would people like that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I began to receive A Course of Love December 1st, 1998. So this is quite a while back. And for a couple of years before that, it was really new to me. I had just begun my spiritual path. I'd been raised a Catholic. and had really no interest in it. Didn't really know anything about anything, you know, it was just, but I was working at the University of Minnesota, and I had two good friends there. We worked as a team, and they both became pregnant within days of each other. But the outcome of the pregnancies was very different. One woman's baby died, a baby girl named Grace. The other had a boy who was healthy. But it was that relationship that developed between the three of us as we comforted our friend in grief. It became something I'd never experienced before, because it wasn't a one-way comforting. It wasn't two women who didn't have anything to grieve comforting the other one. It was like a sharing. It became the sharing of grief. We all began to be very vulnerable and open up about the griefs that we had and the troubles of our lives. It was like our masks came down. And so this happened just before all of this that I'm talking about with my friends, and it began the spiritual experience because we began to have experiences. I mean, it was just a total surprise, I think, to all of us. But in sharing the way we did and to trying to answer some of those questions you ask when a baby has died, we began to do reading, and then we began to have dreams, and we began to share some experiences that told us that there was more going on than what we could share in our bodies. And one of the things, well, I was still at that job. I'll just go on. I was still at that job when I had the dream that I feel was the beginning of my call to A Course in Love. And that dream told me you can no longer sell your mind for money. Your mind belongs to God. So I was working at the U, July 1997, and I loved my job. I loved these women I worked with, and I felt this power of this dream, and that it might be a prophetic dream, but I kind of tried to ignore it. And then I got to this place of being unable to keep my mind on my work. It was just like I couldn't do it anymore. And so I did leave my job. And then it was sort of that waiting for the call. And this incredible longing and desire that arose in me, because I felt that I'd been called, but what had I been called to? I'd left my job. Where was this work for God? And I did all these, people laugh at me now when I tell it because I went to church. I'm a Catholic. I started going to the early morning mass, and I even made meetings with the two priests at my church. It was like, well, what's this work for God? So I think what you can remember, what you can forget after you hear about a person being called is that when they're first called, not very many of us have a clue what we're called to, So it took 8 months. It was 8 months of this wondering what it was, longing to hear the answer about what it was. I felt like Jesus was really bringing me to this peak of my longing and desire, so that I was totally willing. And then on November 25th, which was my friend Mary's birthday, Mary's Grape's mother, she came over for coffee. And she said, Mari, I had a dream. She had a dream in which she saw a new Course in Miracles. And as soon as she said that, it was like I could see that all these signs had been there, but I couldn't take them in. It's like this was work for Jesus, way too grand for me to imagine. But once it came out, once it was said, it was like, yeah, that's what it is. And I loved Course in Miracles. I mean, I didn't ever take any classes or anything, but when I discovered it, I just fell into that voice, and I fell into that rhythm, and I knew Jesus was talking the truth, particularly about me. It's like he had me, he nailed me. And so I just kept reading it. So for 2 years, I just read Course in Miracles. Read it 7 times. I did the workbook. So I knew A Course in Miracles. I knew how it had come about. I knew it took Helen 7 years. You know, all these things I knew, and I didn't know how this was going to affect me then.